Catherine's hand trembled as she stared at the photo on her phone. Daniel's arm was draped casually around her shoulders, both of them laughing at something the camera had caught mid-moment. The comments kept flooding in. "You two are so cute together. Couple goals. When's the wedding?" She looked up at Kang Tae standing in the doorway of their bedroom, his face a mask of barely controlled rage. His jaw was clenched so tight she could see the muscle twitching. His hands were fisted at his sides. In 6 months of marriage, she had never seen him display any emotion stronger than polite disinterest. "It's not what it looks like," she said, her voice coming out smaller than she intended. "Really?" His voice was dangerously quiet. "Because it looks like my wife is being called someone else's girlfriend on the internet." Kang Tae. "Do you love him?" The question hung in the air between them like a knife. Katherine opened her mouth, closed it. How could she explain that Daniel wasn't the problem? That Daniel was just a symptom of a marriage that had been dead on arrival? "Answer me, Katherine." Kang Tae's voice cracked on her name. "Do you love him?" "I don't even know if you'd care if I did." The words came out bitter, sharp. "You certainly don't act like you care about anything I do." Something flickered across his face. Pain maybe. Or anger. "You have no idea what I care about." "You're right. I don't. Because in 6 months of marriage, you've barely spoken to me. You sleep in a different room. You leave before I wake up. You come home after I'm asleep. The only time I see you is at dinner, where we sit in silence like strangers." Katherine felt 6 months of loneliness boiling over. "So forgive me if I enjoyed having someone actually acknowledge my existence." Kang Tae grabbed his car keys from the dresser, his movements jerky and violent. "I need to leave." "Of course you do. That's what you're best at. Leaving." He stopped at the door, his back to her. For a moment, she thought he might turn around, might finally say something real. But then he walked out, and the door slammed so hard the wedding photo on the wall crashed to the floor, glass shattering everywhere. Katherine stared at their smiling faces behind the cracked glass, and started to laugh. It was a broken, slightly hysterical sound. That photo was the perfect metaphor for their marriage. Beautiful on the surface, shattered underneath. Before we dive into how Katherine and Kang Tae got here, if you love dramatic love stories with real emotion and unexpected twists, hit that subscribe button right now. Trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. And drop a comment telling me if you've ever been in a relationship where you felt invisible, because Katherine's story might hit a little too close to home. Now let's rewind 6 months. Let's go back to the wedding that looked like a fairy tale, but felt like a business transaction. Katherine had known something was wrong the moment she walked down the aisle. Not because anything looked wrong. Everything was perfect. The flowers were imported white roses and peonies, arranged in cascading displays that probably cost more than most people's cars. The venue was a luxury hotel in Seoul with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Han River. 300 guests in designer clothes sat in perfect rows, their faces politely interested. But when Katherine's eyes found Kang Tae waiting at the altar, his expression was completely blank. He looked like a man attending a business meeting, not his own wedding. Handsome, yes. Devastatingly so. His black tuxedo was custom-tailored to his lean frame. His dark hair styled perfectly, his posture ramrod straight. But his eyes were empty. Katherine's father squeezed her arm as they walked. "You're doing the right thing," he whispered. "This merger will secure both families." Merger. That's what this was. Katherine was marrying a stranger because her father's business needed Kang Tae's family's connections in Korea, and Kang Tae's family wanted the American market access her father could provide. It was all very logical, very practical, very unromantic. They'd met exactly 3 times before today. 3 times to decide the rest of their lives. The first meeting was at her parents' house in Los Angeles. Katherine had been home from college for the summer when her mother nervously announced they were having important guests. Kang Tae had arrived with his parents, all of them in expensive clothes, speaking in rapid Korean that Katherine only half understood despite her mother's attempts to teach her over the years. Kang Tae had shaken her hand. "Nice to meet you, Katherine." His English was perfect, barely accented. His hand was warm, his grip firm, his eye contact minimal. The parents talked business. Katherine and Kang Tae sat on opposite ends of the couch in painful silence. She tried to make conversation. "So you run your family's tech company?" "I'm being groomed to take over as CEO, yes." "That must be stressful." "It's expected." "Right. Do you enjoy it?" "Enjoy it? The work. Do you like what you do?" He'd looked at her like she'd asked if he enjoyed breathing. "It's my duty." That was the end of that conversation. The second meeting was dinner with both families in Seoul, where Katherine's parents had flown her under the pretense of exploring her heritage. Except the exploration involved sitting in a private room at an upscale restaurant while the parents discussed merger details and occasionally asked Katherine and Kang Tae questions like they were interviewing candidates. Katherine graduated top of her class in marketing, her father had said proudly. Kang Tae speaks 4 languages, his mother had countered. It was like a weird competition where they were both the prizes and the contestants. At one point, Kang Tae's father had asked directly, "Are you both amenable to this arrangement?" Katherine had looked at Kang Tae. He'd been staring at his untouched food, his expression carefully neutral. She'd waited for him to object, to say this was insane, to suggest they actually get to know each other first. Instead he'd said, "If it benefits both families, I have no objections." No objections. Not exactly a ringing endorsement. But Katherine's father had been so hopeful, so excited about the business opportunities. And her mother had been dropping hints about wanting grandchildren. And Katherine had just graduated with no clear direction, no job prospects she was passionate about. What did she have to go back to in LA? An apartment with 2 roommates and a string of failed relationships with men who couldn't commit? At least this was a commitment. At least this was something. "I'm amenable," Katherine had heard herself say. Kang Tae had finally looked at her then. Really looked at her. And for just a second, she'd seen something flicker in his dark eyes. Surprise? Relief? Resignation? Before she could decipher it, his expression had gone blank again. The third meeting was 2 days before the wedding, for final dress fittings and photo sessions. They'd been left alone in the venue while the wedding planner dealt with some crisis about chair covers. Kang Tae had stood by the windows, hands in his pockets, looking out at the Seoul skyline. "Are you having second thoughts?" Katherine had asked, because someone needed to acknowledge the elephant in the room. "Are you?" he'd replied without turning around. "I asked first." He'd been quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, "This is a good arrangement. It's practical. We're compatible on paper. But not in practice. We don't know each other well enough to determine that." "Exactly. So maybe we should get to know each other before we legally bind ourselves together forever." Kang Tae had finally turned to look at her. "Would you like to have dinner? Tonight?" Katherine's heart had jumped. "Yes. That would be nice. I'll have my assistant make reservations. We should discuss expectations for the marriage. Division of household responsibilities, financial arrangements, that sort of thing." Oh, he wanted a business meeting. Of course he did. Right. Expectations. Sure. The dinner had been exactly as romantic as it sounded. They'd sat in a private room at an expensive restaurant, and Kang Tae had literally brought a list. A typed list of discussion points. "I work long hours," he'd said, consulting his notes. "I'll likely be home late most nights. I don't expect you to wait up." "Okay. I'll arrange for a housekeeper to handle cooking and cleaning. You won't need to worry about that." "I can cook." "There's no need. Your time would be better spent on other pursuits. Job hunting if you'd like to work. Social activities. Whatever you prefer." "What if my preference is to cook dinner for my husband sometimes?" He'd looked confused by this. "If you insist. But it's not expected." The conversation had continued in that vein. Kang Tae had everything planned out. Separate bedrooms, at least initially, to give each other privacy. Weekly dinners with his parents. Monthly check-ins to ensure the arrangement was working for both parties. It was like negotiating a roommate agreement, not a marriage. At the end of dinner, Katherine had asked, "What about kids? Is that part of the arrangement?" Kang Tae had shifted uncomfortably. "Eventually. When we're both ready. There's no rush." "And the physical aspect of marriage?" His jaw had tightened. "We can discuss that when and if it becomes relevant." When and if. Not exactly the passionate response she'd been hoping for. So here they were, wedding day. And Katherine was walking toward a future that felt increasingly like a beautiful prison. She reached the altar. Her father placed her hand in Kang Tae's. His hand was trembling slightly, she noticed with surprise. Nerves? Or was he cold? The ceremony passed in a blur. Katherine heard herself saying, "I do" at the appropriate moments. She heard Kang Tae's steady voice repeating vows that sounded more like contract terms. And then the officiant was saying, "You may kiss the bride." Kang Tae had leaned in. Katherine had closed her eyes. And their lips had barely touched. It was less than a kiss and more like an accident of proximity. It lasted maybe 1 second before Kang Tae pulled back, his expression still maddeningly neutral. The guests applauded anyway. The reception was more of the same. Photos where Kang Tae's hand hovered near Katherine's waist without quite touching. Toasts about partnership and alliance and mutual benefit. Their first dance, where Kang Tae held her at a respectful distance and moved with mechanical precision. "You're a good dancer," Katherine had tried. "I had lessons. My mother insisted." "Of course she did." "Katherine." He'd said her name like he was testing it out. "This doesn't have to be terrible. Doesn't it? We can be friends. Companions. It could be worse." How comforting. Something had flashed across his face then. Hurt maybe. But he'd shuttered it quickly. "I'm trying." "Are you? Because it feels like you're tolerating. There's a difference." He'd opened his mouth to respond, but then the song had ended and his parents were there, pulling him away from more photos, more introductions, more performance. They'd left the reception in a car decorated with ribbons and just married signs. Finally alone. Finally a chance to actually talk. Katherine had reached for his hand in the back seat. She'd needed some connection, some reassurance that this was real, that they could make it work. Kang Tae had let her hold his hand for exactly 3 seconds before gently extracting it to check his phone. So the work email. And that had set the tone for everything that followed. Their penthouse apartment in Gangnam was stunning. All glass and modern design, designer furniture, a view that belonged in a magazine. It had 3 bedrooms. Kang Tae had taken the master suite. He'd shown Katherine to the guest room with an apology. "I thought you'd want your own space to decorate as you please. Make it your own. This is the guest room. For now. Until you're comfortable." Until she was comfortable. How long did he think that would take? Months? Years? Never? The first morning of married life, Katherine woke up alone. She'd half expected Kang Tae to at least have breakfast with her, some acknowledgement that their lives had changed. Instead, she found a note on the kitchen counter in neat handwriting. "Had to leave early for a meeting. Coffee is ready. Help yourself to anything in the kitchen." Help yourself to anything in the kitchen. Like she was a guest. In her own home. Katherine poured the coffee he'd left, noting that he'd set out her favorite creamer, the vanilla oat milk she'd mentioned once in passing. So he'd been paying attention. Just not enough to actually stick around. The apartment was silent except for the hum of expensive appliances. Katherine wandered through rooms that looked like they belonged in an interior design catalog. Everything was perfect and cold and utterly impersonal. There were no photos, no books, no signs that anyone actually lived here. It was a showroom, not a home. She tried to unpack, to make the guest room feel like hers, but everything she owned looked cheap and out of place against the minimalist luxury. Her college posters seemed juvenile. Her collection of paperback novels seemed cluttered. Even her clothes looked wrong hanging in the massive closet. Kang Tae came home at 9 p.m. Katherine was in the living room, pretending to read but actually listening for the door. He looked exhausted, his tie loosened, his hair slightly mussed. "You're still up," he said, surprise evident in his voice. "I live here. Where else would I be?" "I meant it's late. You didn't have to wait up." "I wasn't waiting up. I was just up." Katherine set down her book. "How was work?" "Busy. There's a merger we're finalizing. It's complicated." "Do you want to talk about it?" "It's boring technical stuff. Nothing interesting. I have a degree in business. I might understand." Kang Tae had paused, seeming to actually consider this. Then he'd shaken his head. "It's fine. I don't want to burden you with work stress. Have you eaten?" "Hours ago." "Good. I'll just grab something, and then I have calls to make." He'd moved toward the kitchen, the conversation apparently over. "Kang Tae." He'd stopped, looking back at her with polite inquiry. Like she was interrupting him. Never mind. That became their routine. Kang Tae would leave before dawn. Katherine would wake to find coffee made and a brief note. She'd spend her days job hunting, exploring the neighborhood, trying to learn Korean from apps on her phone. He'd come home late, grab food, disappear into his office for calls. They'd occasionally cross paths in the hallway, exchange pleasantries, exist in the same space without ever really connecting. Dinner became the only guaranteed time they'd be in the same room. The housekeeper, Mrs. Kim, would prepare elaborate meals that Katherine and Kang Tae would eat in silence at opposite ends of their dining table. Sometimes Katherine would try to start conversations. "I went to that palace today. Gyeongbokgung? It was beautiful." "That's nice. The guards do this changing ceremony that's really impressive." "I've seen it." "Right. Of course you have." Silence. Chewing. The clink of chopsticks against plates. How was your day? She'd try again. Productive. Anything exciting happen? Not particularly. Kang Tae, I'm trying here. He'd looked up at that, and she'd seen a flash of something in his eyes. Guilt? Frustration? I appreciate that. Do you? Because it feels like you'd prefer if I just didn't exist. That's not true. Then what is true? Why did you agree to this marriage if you can't even stand to be in the same room as me for more than 10 minutes? Kang Tae had set down his chopsticks carefully. I don't. It's not that I can't stand it. I'm just busy. Work is demanding right now. Work is always demanding. That's an excuse, not a reason. What do you want from me, Katherine? I want you to act like we're married. I want conversations. I want to know about your day. I want to tell you about mine and have you actually care. I want to feel like I'm your wife, not your roommate who you're stuck with. I'm not good at this. His voice had gone quiet. I don't know how to be what you want. I want you to try. That's all. Just try. He'd nodded slowly, but nothing had changed. The next day was the same. And the next. And the next. 2 months in, Katherine had stopped expecting anything different. She moved through the apartment like a ghost, and Kang Tae moved around her like she was furniture. They perfected the art of existing in the same space without actually acknowledging each other. But there were small things that confused her. The way she'd catch Kang Tae watching her sometimes, an intensity in his gaze that disappeared the moment she looked back. The way he always remembered her preferences, her coffee, her favorite snacks that would mysteriously appear in the pantry. The thermostat adjusted to exactly the temperature she'd once mentioned was comfortable. The way his hand would hesitate sometimes when they passed in the hallway, like he wanted to reach for her, but didn't know how. Once she'd been struggling to open a jar in the kitchen, swearing under her breath. Kang Tae had appeared out of nowhere, taken the jar from her hands without a word, opened it with ease, and handed it back. Their fingers had brushed in the exchange. He'd pulled back like she'd burned him. Thank you, Katherine had said. You're welcome. He'd stood there for a moment, seeming to want to say something else. Then he'd just left. Another time, Katherine had been sick with a terrible cold. She'd stayed in bed all day, miserable and congested. She'd woken from a fever-induced nap to find medicine on her nightstand, a glass of water, and a bowl of soup that was still warm. Kang Tae had come in while she was sleeping, had checked on her, had taken care of her. But when she'd emerged that evening to thank him, he'd just nodded and said Mrs. Kim had told him she was sick. Did you bring the soup? Mrs. Kim made it. But did you bring it to my room? A pause. Yes. Thank you. That was kind. It's what anyone would do. You're not anyone. You're my husband. Kang Tae had looked at her with an expression she couldn't read. Feel better, Katherine. And he'd retreated to his office. It was maddening. These glimpses of care, of attention, followed by walls of ice. Katherine didn't know what to do with it. Was he attracted to her and fighting it? Did he resent the marriage and was trying to be polite? Was he just completely indifferent and going through motions out of duty? 3 months in, Katherine tried a different approach. She dressed up one evening, actually put on makeup for the first time since the wedding, wore a dress she knew looked good on her. When Kang Tae came home, she was waiting in the living room. Katherine. He'd stopped short, his eyes widening slightly as he took her in. You look nice. Thank you. I thought maybe we could go out? There's a new Italian restaurant in Itaewon. We could try it together. Have a date. A date. Yeah. You know, like married people do sometimes. Kang Tae had set down his briefcase slowly. You want to go on a date with me? Is that so shocking? I didn't think you'd want to. He'd looked genuinely confused. You never suggested it before. I'm suggesting it now. She'd watched emotions flicker across his face. Something that looked almost like hope, followed quickly by panic, then his usual carefully blank expression. I have a lot of work this week. The merger is reaching a critical phase. Maybe next week. Sure. Next week. Next week never came. Kang Tae always had a reason. A meeting. A deadline. A business trip. After the third excuse, Katherine stopped asking. For months in, she stopped trying entirely. She stopped dressing up. She stopped initiating conversations at dinner. She stopped waiting up hoping he might come home early. She moved through her days in a fog of loneliness that was somehow worse than being actually alone. At least when you're alone, you're not constantly confronted with someone who should care about you but doesn't. She started spending more time out of the apartment. Long walks along the Han River. Hours in coffee shops with her laptop, job hunting with increasing desperation, museums where she could lose herself in art and history, and anything that wasn't her failing marriage. One evening, she came home to find Kang Tae in the kitchen, which was unusual. He was attempting to cook something that involved a lot of smoke and the smoke alarm going off. "What are you doing?" Katherine asked, rushing to open windows. "I was trying to make dinner. Mrs. Kim is sick. I thought." He looked helplessly at the burning pan. "I thought I could cook." "You clearly thought wrong." Katherine turned off the stove, assessed the damage. "What were you even trying to make?" "Galbi. It was supposed to be your favorite. Mrs. Kim mentioned you'd asked her about it." Katherine felt her chest tighten. "You were trying to make my favorite food?" "I wanted to." Kang Tae ran a hand through his hair, looking more disheveled than she'd ever seen him. "I wanted to do something nice. But I ruined it. Obviously." "Why? Why what? Why try now? After 4 months of barely speaking to me? Why suddenly try to make me dinner?" Kang Tae looked at her, and for the first time, she saw his careful control crack. "Because I'm tired of watching you disappear. Because every day you seem a little less here, a little more like a ghost, and I know it's my fault. Because I'm an idiot who doesn't know how to fix what I've broken." Katherine's breath caught. "You think this is broken? Isn't it? Look at us, Katherine. We're strangers living in the same apartment. This isn't a marriage. This is a prison sentence for both of us." "Then why not try? Why not actually talk to me, spend time with me, let me in?" "Because I don't know how." The words exploded out of him. "Because I was raised by people who treated marriage like a business arrangement. Because my father never once told my mother he loved her in my presence. Because I don't have a model for what this is supposed to look like. Because every time I try to figure out what to say to you, my mind goes blank and all I can think is that you deserve better than this. Better than me." They stood in the smoke-filled kitchen, the ruined dinner between them, and Katherine saw her husband clearly for the first time. Not cold. Not indifferent. Terrified. "Kang Tae," she said softly. "I don't need better. I need honest. I need you to stop hiding behind work and excuses, and tell me what you actually want." "I want." He swallowed hard. "I don't know what I want. I've spent my whole life being told what to want. Success. Status. The family business. I don't know how to want things for myself. Do you want this marriage?" The pause was too long. Katherine felt something die in her chest. Then Kang Tae said quietly, "I want you to be happy, even if that means ending this." "That's not an answer." "It's the only answer I have." Katherine had left the kitchen then, retreating to her room, to her separate space, to her separate life. She'd lain in bed and stared at the ceiling and made a decision. She couldn't live like this anymore. She needed something that was hers. Something that gave her purpose beyond being Kang Tae's invisible wife. The next morning, she'd started seriously job hunting. And 2 weeks later, she'd gotten a call from Global Reach Marketing. Katherine's first day at Global Reach felt like stepping into sunlight after months in a cave. The office was bright and modern, with open workspaces that encouraged collaboration. People smiled at her. They introduced themselves. They seemed genuinely happy she was there. Katherine Wright, a tall Korean-American man with an easy smile, approached her desk. "I'm Daniel Park, Creative Department. Welcome to the chaos." "Thanks. I'm still trying to figure out where everything is." "Give it a week, you'll be navigating like a pro." "Hey, a bunch of us usually grab lunch together. You should join." "Really? That would be great." "Cool. Fair warning though, we argue a lot about stupid stuff. Last week, Jinho almost threw hands over whether pizza is a sandwich." Katherine laughed, the sound surprising her. When was the last time she'd actually laughed? "What's the verdict?" "Strongly not a sandwich. I will die on this hill." Lunch with the group was chaotic and loud, and exactly what Katherine needed. Daniel kept the conversation flowing, making sure Katherine wasn't left out, explaining inside jokes and office politics. He was funny and warm and paid attention when she talked. "So what brought you to Seoul?" he asked. "My husband's work." Katherine tried to keep her voice neutral. "A trailing spouse life. That's rough. My sister did that when her husband got transferred to Singapore. She said the hardest part was building a whole new life from scratch." "Yeah, it's definitely an adjustment." "Well, you've got us now. We're very annoying but very loyal." Over the next few weeks, Katherine threw herself into work. She was good at it, she realized. Her ideas were well received. Her strategies were effective. People actually listened to her. It was intoxicating after months of feeling invisible. And Daniel became a genuine friend. He'd bring her coffee in the mornings, remembering after one conversation that she took oat milk. He'd ask about her day and actually listen to the answer. He'd send her funny memes during boring meetings. He'd stay late when she was on a deadline, helping her brainstorm even though it wasn't his project. "You don't have to stay," Katherine said one evening when most of the office had cleared out. "I know, but this campaign is going to be killer, and I want to see where it goes. Plus, if I go home now, I'll just order delivery and watch Netflix. At least here I'm being marginally productive." No hot date. Me? Nah. Soul dating scene is brutal. Everyone wants to know your job, your salary, your family background before they'll even consider coffee. He grinned. "Plus, I'm picky." "Picky how?" "I don't know. I want someone who actually wants to spend time with me, you know? Someone who chooses to be with me, not because it makes sense on paper but because they actually like who I am." Katherine felt that hit a little too close to home. "That's not picky. That's normal. Tell that to my mom. She's been trying to set me up with her friends' daughters for years. Very practical matches. Very sensible. Very boring. Sounds familiar." Daniel had looked at her curiously. "Your marriage arranged? Something like that. Is it working out?" Katherine had considered lying. But something about Daniel's open, non-judgmental expression made her honest. "Not really. We're basically roommates who occasionally eat dinner together." "That sucks." "I'm sorry." "It is what it is." "Does he know what he's missing out on? Because you're brilliant and funny and anyone would be lucky to have you actually engage with them." Katherine had felt her cheeks warm. "You barely know me." "I know enough. You're the person who brought donuts for everyone when you found out it was Jinho's birthday. You stayed late to help Sujin with her presentation, even though you had your own deadline. You laugh at my terrible jokes. You're good people, Katherine." It was such a simple compliment, but it had made Katherine want to cry. When was the last time someone had said something nice about her just because? When was the last time someone had noticed her kindness, her effort, her existence? "Thanks, Daniel. That means a lot." Things at home hadn't improved. If anything, Kang Tae seemed more distant. He'd started leaving earlier, coming home later. Sometimes Katherine wouldn't see him for days at a time. She'd hear him in his room late at night, pacing, making phone calls in rapid Korean she couldn't follow. She stopped trying to have dinner with him. It was too depressing to sit at that table alone, waiting for someone who never showed up or showed up just to ignore her. Instead, she'd eat at her desk at work, or grab something with colleagues, or pick up takeout on her way home. The apartment felt less like a home, and more like a hotel where two strangers happened to be staying. Katherine had finally started decorating the guest room, making it actually hers. She'd hung photos from her college days, arranged her books on shelves, bought a cozy reading chair. If this was her space, she might as well make it comfortable. One morning, about 6 weeks into her new job, Katherine came out of her room to find Kang Tae in the kitchen. Actually in the kitchen, at 7 a.m., making coffee. He looked startled to see her. "You're up," he said. "I work. I have to be up." "Right. Of course." He poured 2 cups of coffee, added oat milk to one, and slid it across the counter to her. "How is the job?" "Good. Really good." That's good." He seemed to be struggling for words. "You seem happier." "I am happier. It's nice to have purpose." Something flickered across his face. "I'm glad." They stood in awkward silence, drinking their coffee. Katherine noticed he had dark circles under his eyes, like he hadn't been sleeping. His usually perfect hair was slightly messy. He looked tired and strangely vulnerable. "Are you okay?" she found herself asking. "Fine. Just busy with work." "You're always busy with work. It's an important time. The CEO transition is happening sooner than expected. My father wants to retire early." "That's big. Congratulations." "Thank you." Another pause. "Katherine, about us." His phone rang. Kang Tae looked at the screen, and his jaw tightened. "I'm sorry. I have to take this." "Of course you do." He'd answered in Korean, moving to his office, the door closing firmly behind him. Katherine had finished her coffee alone and left for work. That evening, the office was having after-work drinks to celebrate closing a major campaign. Katherine hadn't planned to go. Social events where everyone else had partners or dates always made her feel more alone. But Daniel had insisted. "Come on, You worked hard on this. You deserve to celebrate. Plus, it's an open bar. Free drinks. I don't want to be the awkward single person. You won't be. I'm single. We can be awkward together. So Katherine had gone. And it had been fun. Really fun. Daniel was attentive and funny, making sure her glass was never empty, pulling her into conversations, dancing with her when someone put on music. At one point, he'd slung his arm around her shoulders for a group photo, both of them laughing at something their colleague had said. Katherine hadn't thought anything of it. It was just a friendly gesture. Just co-workers having fun. She didn't know someone from the office had posted the photo to their company Instagram. She didn't know the comments that would pour in. She didn't know that Kang Tae, working late in his office, would see it while mindlessly scrolling his phone during a break. She didn't know that seeing his wife smiling in another man's arms would finally shatter the carefully constructed walls he'd built around his heart. Katherine came home around 11, buzzed and happy and feeling good for the first time in months. She was humming as she unlocked the door, already thinking about the hot shower she was going to take. The living room light was on. Kang Tae was sitting on the couch in the dark, his phone in his hand, his expression thunderous. "You're home," Katherine said, surprised. He was never home this early. "Where were you?" The question was sharp, accusatory. Katherine felt her good mood evaporate. "Work event. I told you about it this morning. You didn't tell me he would be there." "Who?" Kang Tae held up his phone. The Instagram photo filled the screen. Daniel's arm around her. Her genuine smile. The comments calling them a couple. "It's not what it looks like," Katherine started. "Really? Because it looks like my wife is being called someone else's girlfriend on the internet." And that's where we started. With Kang Tae's rage and Katherine's defensiveness and 6 months of miscommunication about to explode. After Kang Tae stormed out, Katherine sat in the wreckage of their broken wedding photo and finally let herself cry. She cried for the marriage she'd hoped for. She cried for the loneliness she'd endured. She cried for the connection she'd felt with Daniel that should have been with her husband. She cried until she had no tears left, and then she went to bed. She didn't hear Kang Tae come home at 3 a.m. Didn't hear him pause outside her door for a full 5 minutes. Didn't hear the way he whispered her name so quietly it was almost not a sound at all. Didn't hear him walk away. If you're hooked on Katherine and Kang Tae's story and want to see how this emotional roller coaster ends, make sure you're subscribed and hit that notification bell. Also, drop a comment and let me know, Team Daniel or Team Kang Tae, because things are about to get even more complicated. Katherine woke up with swollen eyes and a pounding headache. She checked her phone. 7 a.m. 3 missed calls from Daniel. A text from her mother asking how married life was going. The Instagram post had even more comments now, including several in Korean that she didn't understand but could guess weren't positive. She dragged herself to the kitchen. Kang Tae was there, and he looked as rough as she felt. Still wearing yesterday's clothes, his hair a mess, shadows under his eyes like he hadn't slept at all. "We need to talk," they both said at the same time. "You first," Katherine said, too tired to argue. Kang Tae gestured to the dining table. They sat across from each other, the same positions they'd occupied for countless silent meals. But this felt different. Charged. Like something was about to break. "I owe you an explanation," Kang Tae began. His voice was hoarse. A real one. "Okay. I've been in love with you since our engagement dinner." Katherine's brain stuttered to a halt. "What? You asked me about astronomy. Remember? During that dinner with our parents. You asked what I wanted to study before business school. And I told you about wanting to be an astrophysicist, and instead of laughing or calling it impractical, you asked me what my favorite constellation was." He laughed bitterly. It was such a small thing. But no one had ever asked me what I wanted. What I liked. They only ever asked what I was going to do for the company. Let me finish. Please. I've been trying to say this for 6 months, and if I stop now, I might never get it out. He took a shaky breath. "You were everything I didn't know I wanted. Smart and kind and real. And I thought maybe this arrangement could become something more. Maybe we could fall in love the way people do in those movies my mother watches. Then why did you push me away?" "Because I'm a coward." The words came out broken. "Because you didn't choose me. You were stuck with me because of our parents' business deal. I convinced myself that if I kept my distance, if I didn't burden you with my feelings, you wouldn't hate me for trapping you in this marriage. I thought I was being noble, giving you space, letting you live your life without the pressure of a husband who actually wanted you." Katherine felt tears streaming down her face. "You idiot. I know. I did choose you. Maybe not at first, but I chose to try. I chose to make this work. I chose to hope that maybe we could be happy together. Her voice was rising. But you never gave me a chance. You shut me out completely. Do you have any idea how that felt? To live with someone who acted like you were a burden they had to tolerate. I wasn't tolerating you. I was trying not to want you so badly it hurt. Kang Tae's hands were shaking. Do you know how many nights I stood outside your door, wanting to knock? Wanting to ask if I could just sit with you, talk to you, anything? But I'd stand there and think about how you were only in that room because of a contract, and I'd walk away. I heard you sometimes. I'd lie there hoping you'd come in. God, we're idiots. Kang Tae put his head in his hands. We wasted 6 months being miserable, when we could have been trying. Why now? Katherine asked. Why tell me this now? Because seeing you happy with him made me realize I'd rather have you hate me for trying and failing than lose you to someone brave enough to actually pursue you. He looked up, his eyes red. Is it too late? Are you in love with Daniel? I barely know Daniel. But you could be. I saw how you looked in that photo. You were glowing. He makes you happy. He makes me feel visible. That's not the same as happy. Katherine wiped her eyes. Daniel is a good friend. He was kind when I needed kindness. But I don't love him, Kang Tae. I've been trying to love you for 6 months, but you wouldn't let me. I'm letting you now. I'm begging you to. Kang Tae stood abruptly, came around the table, dropped to his knees in front of her chair. Give me another chance. Let me start over. Let me court you properly, the way I should have from the beginning. Katherine looked down at her husband on his knees, vulnerability written across every feature, and felt her heart crack open. I don't know if I can survive another 6 months of hoping. Then don't hope. Make demands. Tell me what you need. I'll do it. Anything. I need honesty. No more walls. No more assuming you know what I want. If you're scared, tell me. If you're angry, tell me. If you want me, tell me. I want you. The words were fierce. I've wanted you every single day. I want to wake up next to you and make you breakfast, and hear about your terrible day at work and watch stupid TV shows with you. I want to learn what makes you laugh and what makes you cry and everything in between. I want all of it, Katherine. I want you. That's a start. She reached out, touched his face for the first time in months. He leaned into her palm like he was starving for touch. But Kang Tae, if we do this, you have to actually do it. No more running away when things get hard. No more hiding in work. We deal with problems together. Together, he agreed. I promise. Don't promise. Just do it. He turned his face, kissed her palm. Can I kiss you? Your lips, I mean. Ora alquish. Not a wedding photo kiss. Katherine felt her breath catch. Yes. Kang Tae stood slowly, pulling her up with him. He cupped her face in his hands, thumbs brushing away her tears. I've imagined this so many times. Stop imagining. Start doing. He kissed her. Finally really kissed her. It was soft at first, tentative, like he was afraid she might disappear. Then Katherine made a small sound and pressed closer, and Kang Tae groaned and deepened the kiss, one hand sliding into her hair, the other around her waist, pulling her against him. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Kang Tae rested his forehead against hers. I'm going to be bad at this. At the whole relationship thing. I'm going to mess up. I know. But I'm going to try. Really try. That's all I need. They spent the day together. Actually together. Kang Tae called in sick to work for the first time in his career. They ordered takeout and sat on the couch and talked. Really talked. Kang Tae told her about growing up under his father's impossible expectations, about watching his parents' cold marriage, and swearing he'd never be like them while simultaneously having no idea how to be different. Katherine told him about feeling like a disappointment to her ambitious parents, about agreeing to the marriage partly out of duty, and partly out of fear that this might be her only chance at the life she was supposed to want. We were both so scared, Katherine said. We still are. But maybe we can be scared together instead of alone. I'd like that. But there was still the Daniel situation. Katherine knew she needed to address it directly, set clear boundaries. She called him that afternoon while Kang Tae was making them lunch, another first. Hey. Daniel answered cheerfully. How's your head? You were pretty tipsy last night. I've fine. Listen, Daniel, I need to talk to you about something. Oh, that sounds serious. My husband saw the photo. From last night. Oh, shit. Is everything okay? Actually, yes. It kind of forced us to have a conversation we've been avoiding for months. Katherine paused. But I think I need to set some clearer boundaries. You're a great friend, but I don't want to give the wrong impression. To you or to anyone else. Katherine, I knew you were married. I wasn't trying to. Okay, maybe I thought if things weren't working out, but I never would have pushed. You know that, right? Ido. And I appreciate everything you've done for me. You helped me remember who I am when I was losing myself. But I want to make my marriage work. He's a lucky guy. I mean that. Daniel's voice was warm. Hey, does your husband like awkward dinners? Maybe we should all hang out. Clear the air. Let me prove I'm not trying to steal his wife. That might actually help. Let me ask him. Kang Tae, when she proposed it, looked like she'd suggested having dinner with a shark. You want me to have dinner with the man whose arm was around you? I want you to meet my friend. My colleague. Someone who's important to me, but who's not a threat to us. What if I hate him? Then you hate him politely. For me. Kang Tae had agreed, though he looked deeply uncomfortable about it. Fine. But if he touches you, I'm not responsible for what happens. Kathai. Joking. Mostly. The dinner was set for the following Saturday at their apartment. Katherine spent the day cooking with Kang Tae, teaching him the basics since his previous attempt had nearly burned down the kitchen. It was domestic and sweet and everything Katherine had wanted. You're good at this, she said, watching him chop vegetables with surprising competence once he got the hang of it. I'm highly motivated. If I poison your friend, you might hold it against me. Dark. Realistic. When Daniel arrived with his girlfriend Yuna, a surprise that made Kang Tae visibly relax, the evening started off tense. The two men sized each other up like territorial animals. But Yuna was a force of nature, immediately complimenting the apartment, the food, Katherine's dress, and somehow getting Kang Tae to smile within 10 minutes. The next few weeks were a revelation. Kang Tae approached their renewed relationship with the same intensity he brought to everything. Except now that intensity was focused entirely on Katherine. He wanted to know everything. They started having breakfast together every morning before work. Kang Tae would cook, simple things at first, scrambled eggs and toast, but he was trying. They'd sit at the kitchen island, close enough to touch, and actually talk. Tell me something I don't know about you. Kang Tae would say. I hate cilantro. It tastes like soap. Noted. Tomorrow no cilantro. Your turn. Tell me something. I'm terrified of birds. Pigeons especially. Katherine had burst out laughing. You're terrified of pigeons? You run a multi-billion-dollar company but you're scared of birds? They're unpredictable. They have those beady eyes and they dive at your head. Oh my God, this is the best thing I've ever learned about you. Kang Tae had smiled, that soft smile that was becoming Katherine's favorite thing. See, this is what I missed. This. They started going on actual dates. Kang Tae insisted on proper courtship. He'd take her to dinner at restaurants he'd carefully researched, to art galleries, to a midnight showing of her favorite movie. He'd hold her hand in public, kiss her at crosswalks, pull her close on the subway. It was like he was making up for 6 months of not touching her by constantly touching her now. Is this okay? He'd ask every time. Can I hold your hand? Can I kiss you? Kang Tae, you're my husband. You don't have to ask every time. Yes, I do. I spent 6 months assuming things about what you wanted. I'm done assuming. But it wasn't all smooth. Old habits died hard. 2 weeks into their fresh start, Kang Tae had a crisis at work. A major deal was falling apart, and he'd reverted to old patterns. Coming home late, shutting himself in his office, barely eating. Katherine had found him at midnight, staring at his computer screen with bloodshot eyes. Come to bed, she'd said. I can't. I have to fix this. Kang Tae. What did we agree about walls? He tensed. This is different. This is work. This is you shutting me out because things are hard. That's the definition of a wall. Katherine had walked over, closed his laptop despite his protest. Talk to me. What's wrong? The merger is falling apart. If this fails, it reflects badly on me right when I'm supposed to take over as CEO. My father will think I'm not ready. Okay. That's scary. What else? What do you mean what else? There's always something else with you. What's the fear underneath the fear? Kang Tae had been quiet for a long moment. Then, what if I fail at this too? What if I'm good at business but bad at everything else? What if I can't balance being a good CEO and a good husband? What if I have to choose? Then we figure it out together. But you don't get to shut me out and make that choice alone. Katherine had pulled him up from his chair. You need sleep. You need food. You need to take care of yourself so you can think clearly. Come on. She'd made him eat leftover takeout while she rubbed his shoulders. She'd run him a hot shower. She'd gotten him into bed and held him while he finally let himself be vulnerable. I'm supposed to be strong, he'd whispered. I'm supposed to have all the answers. You're supposed to be human. Humans need help sometimes. That's not weakness, Kang Tae. That's just real. The next morning, Kang Tae had approached the work crisis differently. He'd asked Katherine to listen while he talked through options. She'd offered a perspective from her marketing background that he hadn't considered. Together, they'd worked out a solution that ended up saving the merger. You saved me, he'd told her that night. No. We saved it together. That's how this works now. Katherine had her own struggles. The fear that this was temporary, that Kang Tae would revert to the cold stranger he'd been, haunted her. One evening, about a month into their renewed relationship, she'd gotten quiet and withdrawn. Where did you go? Kang Tae had asked, pulling her into his lap on the couch. Nowhere. I'm right here. Katherine. No walls, remember? What's wrong? What if you wake up one day and realize this is too much work? That I'm too much work? What if you decide the old way was easier? The old way was killing me. Kang Tae had cupped her face, making her look at him. Every day I pretended not to want you was torture. Being with you really with you? This is the only thing that makes sense. You're not too much. You're exactly right. Promise. I promise. And when you get scared again, because you will, you tell me. We talk about it. We don't let fear win. Okay. 6 weeks into their fresh start, Kang Tae had come home with a key. Katherine had been confused. I already have a key to the apartment. Not to the apartment. To my room. Our room. He'd placed it in her palm. I want you to move in with me. Actually share a space, like married people do. But only if you want to. No pressure. I can wait as long as you need. Katherine had looked at the key, at the hope and nervousness on Kang Tae's face, and made her decision. Help me pack. They'd moved her things together, Kang Tae treating each item like it was precious. He'd already made space for her, cleared half the closet, emptied drawers, even installed a vanity area that week. You were pretty confident I'd say yes, Katherine had teased. I was desperately hopeful. There's a difference. That first night in their shared room had been everything. They'd lain in bed together, Katherine's head on Kang Tae's chest, his arm around her waist, and it had felt monumental and utterly natural at once. I used to imagine this. Kang Tae had murmured in the darkness. On the other side of that wall. I'd lie there, and imagine what you'd feel like next to me. If you'd let me hold you. And reality is so much better. Because you actually want to be here. Katherine had tilted her face up to kiss him. There's nowhere else I'd rather be. But the real test came when Katherine's parents announced they were visiting Seoul. Her mother had been skeptical of the arranged marriage from the start. Certain Katherine was miserable. She'd called regularly, fishing for complaints, offering to help Katherine come home, if she needed to. Your mother thinks I'm holding you hostage, Kang Tae had said when Katherine told him about the visit. To be fair, for the first 6 months, you kind of were. Emotionally, anyway. I deserve that. How do I convince her I'm not a terrible husband? By being exactly who you are now. She'll see the difference. Katherine's parents had arrived expecting to find their daughter miserable in a loveless marriage. Instead, they'd found Kang Tae and Katherine arriving at their hotel together, hand in hand, clearly comfortable with each other. Darling, you look wonderful, her mother had said, surprised. I am wonderful, Mom. We both are. Dinner had been at a restaurant Kang Tae had chosen carefully, knowing Katherine's parents' tastes. He'd been attentive and warm, pulling out Katherine's chair, ordering her favorite dishes, keeping his hand on the small of her back. Her mother had watched this with growing confusion. So the marriage is working out? Her mother had asked carefully. It's more than working out, Katherine had said honestly. We had some growing pains at first. But we figured it out. Growing pains, her mother had repeated, clearly fishing for details. Kang Tae had squeezed Katherine's hand under the table before speaking. I wasn't the husband Katherine deserved at first. I let fear control me, and I hurt her in the process. But she gave me a second chance, and I'm grateful every single day. Katherine's father, who'd been quiet, had studied Kang Tae with new interest. You're different than I expected. Your father always spoke of you as very businesslike. I was. Katherine taught me there's more to life than quarterly reports. That it's okay to want things. To feel things. Kang Tae had looked at Katherine with such open affection that her mother's eyes had widened. She taught me how to be brave. I'm trying to teach her it's safe to stay. Katherine had felt tears prickling. Under the table, she'd squeezed his hand back. Her mother's expression had softened. Well, this is unexpected. Good unexpected? Katherine had asked. Very good unexpected, darling. The evening had ended with her parents looking genuinely happy for them. Her mother had pulled Katherine aside as they were leaving. He looks at you like you hung the moon. Hold on to that. I plan to, Mom. 3 months after their renewal, Kang Tae's father had announced his retirement and Kang Tae's promotion to CEO. It came with a condition, moving back into the family compound in a traditional neighborhood. A show of respect for the company's heritage. Kang Tae had come home that evening looking shell-shocked. Katherine had found him on their balcony, staring at the city lights. Tell me, she'd said simply. My father wants me to move to the family compound. Says it's more appropriate for the company head. More traditional. He turned to her, fear in his eyes. But I don't want to leave here. This is our home. Our life. This is where we figured out how to be us. Then we say no. It's not that simple. The board expects. Kang Tae. Katherine had taken his face in her hands. What do you want? Not what your father wants. Not what the board wants. You. I want to stay here. With you. I want to build our life in our space. I want to be a CEO who doesn't sacrifice his marriage for appearances. Then that's what we do. You tell your father you'll take the position, but on your terms. You're not a child anymore. You get to make your own choices. What if I lose everything? You won't. But even if you did, you'd still have me. We'd figure it out together. That's what partners do. The next day, Kang Tae had called his father. Katherine had listened to the conversation. Or at least Kang Tae's side of it. She'd heard his voice become firm, unyielding, as he explained that he'd accept the CEO position but wouldn't be moving. That his wife and his marriage were non-negotiable. The argument that followed had been loud enough that Katherine heard Kang Tae's father's voice through the phone. Then, surprisingly, she'd heard a woman's voice, Kang Tae's mother, saying something sharp in Korean. When Kang Tae had hung up, he'd looked simultaneously terrified and exhilarated. My mother told my father to stop being a dinosaur. Apparently she's been wanting to retire to Jeju for years, but he insisted they stay in Seoul for appearances. I really like your mother. She told me last month that you were the best thing that ever happened to me and I'd better not screw it up. Kang Tae had pulled Katherine into his arms. I choose you. Every time, every choice, I choose you. I know. And I choose you too. 4 months into their renewed relationship, Katherine had come home from work to find Kang Tae in the kitchen wearing an apron. Not just any apron, the ridiculous kiss the cook apron her mother had given them as a wedding gift that Katherine had hidden as a joke. You found the apron, she'd said, trying not to laugh. I found the apron. Your mother has a sense of humor. You're actually wearing it. It seemed appropriate. He'd turned, spatula in hand, grinning. Well, are you going to follow instructions? Katherine had crossed to him, risen on her toes to kiss him. You're ridiculous. I'm in love, he'd corrected. There's a difference. The words had hung in the air. It was the first time either of them had said it out loud. They'd shown it, implied it, felt it. But saying it was different. Say that again, Katherine had whispered. I'm in love with you. I've been in love with you since before we got married. Since that engagement dinner when you asked about constellations like my dreams mattered. Since I saw you walk down the aisle and realized I'd never seen anyone more beautiful. Since every moment after when I was too much of a coward to tell you. Kang Tae had set down the spatula, giving her his full attention. I love the way you sing off-key in the shower. I love how you steal my hoodies, even though you have your own. I love your terrible reality TV shows and your strong opinions about coffee. I love how you made me want to be braver. I love all of you, Katherine. Every day, more than the day before. Katherine had been crying, happy tears streaming down her face. I love you too. I love your weird obsession with grocery prices. And the way you put on reading glasses like an old man. And how you still ask permission before you kiss me even though we've been married almost a year. I love who you are when you're not trying to be who you think you should be. I love us. Kang Tae had kissed her deeply, his hands in her hair, her arms wrapped around his neck. When they'd broken apart, both breathless, he'd said, "Marry me." We're already married. I know. But let's do it again. A real wedding. Not a business arrangement. Just us, choosing each other in front of everyone. Let me make vows I actually mean. Let me stand up there and tell the world I love you. Yes, Katherine had said through her tears. Yes, let's get married again. They'd planned a small ceremony for their first anniversary, just close friends and family. Nothing like the massive production their first wedding had been. This time it was in a small garden, intimate and personal. Katherine wore a simple white dress. Kang Tae wore a suit he'd chosen himself. Not because it was expected but because he wanted to look good for her. When it came time for vows, Kang Tae had taken her hands and spoken from his heart. Katherine, a year ago I married you because I thought I was supposed to. Because it made sense on paper. Because it benefited our families. Today I'm choosing you because I want to. Because I need to. Because imagining my life without you is like imagining a world without color. You taught me that it's okay to feel things, to want things, to be vulnerable. You taught me that love isn't a weakness but the bravest thing we can do. You gave me permission to be human instead of perfect. I promise to keep choosing you. I promise to keep showing up. I promise to keep being honest even when it's scary. I promise to watch terrible reality TV and debate grocery prices. And kiss you goodnight every single night. I promise to be worthy of the gift you've given me by loving me back. I promise to love you with everything I am, for as long as I live. Katherine had been sobbing before he even finished. Her own vows were equally tearful. Kang Tae, you were a stranger when I married you the first time. A mystery I couldn't solve. A puzzle with pieces I thought were missing. But over this year, I've learned that you weren't broken. You were just scared. And that's okay because so was I. You taught me that sometimes love means being patient. That sometimes the best things are worth fighting for. You taught me that it's okay to demand what I need, to speak up when I'm hurting, to believe that I deserve to be chosen. I promise to keep fighting for us. I promise to keep believing in us even when things get hard. I promise to tell you when I'm scared and listen when you are. I promise to build a life with you that's ours, not anyone else's version of what we should be. I promise to love you loudly enough that you never doubt it again. I promise to be your partner, your best friend, and your home. Always. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife again, Kang Tae had kissed her like it was the first time, and the last time, and every time in between. Their guests had cheered. Katherine's mother had cried. Even Kang Tae's father had looked pleased. And Daniel, standing with Yuna, had raised his glass with a genuine smile. At the small reception, Daniel had made a toast. To Katherine and Kang Tae, who took the long way around but got there in the end. May you always choose each other. To second chances, Yuna had added. To being brave enough to be honest, Kang Tae had said, his eyes on Katherine. To choosing each other, Katherine had finished. Every single day. That night, back in their apartment, their home, Kang Tae had carried Katherine over the threshold despite her laughing protests. We already did this. We're doing it right this time. Everything right this time. He'd set her down in their bedroom, and they'd come together not as strangers fulfilling obligations, but as lovers who'd fought for each other, who'd chosen each other, who'd learned that sometimes the hardest part of love is letting yourself be loved in return. 1 year and 3 months into their marriage, or 6 months into their real marriage as they privately thought of it, Katherine had stood in their bathroom staring at a positive pregnancy test with shaking hands. She'd found Kang Tae making breakfast, humming to himself as he flipped pancakes. The domesticity of it still made her heart swell sometimes. This was her husband. Her partner. Her home. Kang Tae. He'd looked up, seen her face, immediately set down the spatula. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. She'd held out the test. We're going to have a baby. Kang Tae had stared at the test for a solid minute. His expression cycling through shock, fear, and finally pure joy. We're having a baby? We're having a baby. He'd pulled her into his arms, laughing and crying at the same time. We're going to be parents. Oh God, we're going to be parents. I don't know how to be a parent. Neither do I. We'll figure it out together. Like everything else. We're going to be better than our parents, Kang Tae had said fiercely. We're going to teach them it's okay to feel things. To be themselves. To be brave. We're going to teach them that love is worth fighting for, Katherine had agreed. That the best things in life are the ones you have to work for. Their daughter had been born on a rainy Tuesday in April, screaming her displeasure at the world. Kang Tae had cried when he'd held her for the first time, this tiny perfect person they'd made together. She has your eyes, Katherine had said groggily from the hospital bed. She has your stubbornness. Listen to those lungs. We're in so much trouble. The best kind of trouble. They'd named her Gina, meaning truth in Korean. Because their truth, hard-won and precious, was worth celebrating. And if there's one thing Katherine and Kang Tae learned through all of this, it's that sometimes the people we think don't want us are just as scared as we are. Sometimes love isn't about grand gestures, but about showing up every day and choosing each other, even when it's hard. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is be honest about what you want and fight for it. If their story resonated with you, if you've ever been in a relationship where fear held you back or where you had to fight to be seen, please subscribe to our channel. Hit that like button and drop a comment below about a time you had to be brave in love. Your stories inspire us to keep sharing these journeys. And remember, it's never too late to tear down walls and build something beautiful instead. Years later, when Gina asked how her parents fell in love, Katherine and Kang Tae would look at each other and smile. "It's a long story," Katherine would say. "We took the long way around," Kang Tae would add, reaching for his wife's hand like he still couldn't quite believe he was allowed to touch her. "But we got there in the end," Katherine would finish, squeezing back. "And it was worth every difficult step," they'd say together. Because sometimes the best love stories aren't the ones that start perfectly. Sometimes they're the ones where two scared people find the courage to be honest, to be vulnerable, to choose each other even when it would be easier to walk away. Sometimes they're the ones where jealousy becomes the catalyst for truth, and truth becomes the foundation for everything else. And that, Gina would learn as she grew up watching her parents, is the kind of love worth having. The kind worth fighting for. The kind that turns strangers into soulmates, one brave choice at a time.